Chapter 2, Section 3. Healing as release from fear. The emphasis now will be on healing. The miracle is the means, the healing plan is the principle, and healing is the result. Those who speak of, quote, a miracle of healing are combining two orders of reality inappropriately. Healing is not a miracle. The atonement or the final miracle is a remedy, while any type of healing is a result. The atonement is the final miracle, the healing plan of man. The kind of error to which the healing plan is applied is irrelevant. Essentially, all healing is the release from fear. And to undertake the release from fear, you cannot be fearful yourself. You do not understand healing because of your own fear. A major step in the healing plan is to undo error at all levels. Illness, which is really not right-mindedness, is the result of level confusion in the sense that not right-mindedness always entails the belief that what is amiss in one level can adversely affect another level. We have constantly referred to miracles as the means of correcting level confusion, and all mistakes must be corrected at the level on which all mistakes occur. Only the mind is capable of error. The body can act erroneously, but the body acting erroneously is only because the body is responding to misthought. The body cannot create, and the belief that the body can create is a fundamental error, and that fundamental error that the body can create produces all physical symptoms. All physical illness represents a belief in magic. The whole distortion which created magic rests on the belief that there is a creative ability in matter which the mind cannot control. And this belief that there is a creative ability in matter which the mind cannot control, this error can take two forms. It can be believed that the mind can miscreate in the body, or that the body can miscreate in the mind. If it is understood that the mind, which is the only level of creation, cannot create beyond itself, then neither type of confusion need occur. The reason only the mind can create is more obvious than may be immediately apparent. The soul has been created, and the body is a learning device for the mind. Learning devices are not lessons in themselves. Learning device's purpose is merely to facilitate the thinking of the learner. The most that a faulty use of a learning device can do is to fail to facilitate learning. The learning device, the body, has no power in itself to introduce actual learning errors. The body, if properly understood, shares the invulnerability of the healing plan to two-edged application. This is not because the body is a miracle, but because the body is not inherently open to misinterpretation. The body is merely a fact in human experience. The body's abilities can be and frequently are over-evaluated. However, it is almost impossible to deny the body's existence. And those who deny the body's existence, they are engaging in a particularly unworthy form of denial. The term unworthy here implies simply that it is not necessary to protect the mind by denying the unmindful. There is little doubt that the mind can miscreate. If someone denies this unfortunate aspect of the mind's power to miscreate, then one is also denying the power of the mind itself. All material means which man accepts as remedies for bodily ills are merely restatements of magic principles. It was the first level of the error to believe that the body created its own illness. It is a second misstep to attempt to heal the body through non-creative agents. It doesn't follow, however, that the use of these very weak corrective devices is evil. Sometimes the illness has a sufficiently great hold over a mind to render a person inaccessible to the healing. In this case, it may be wise to utilize a compromise approach to mind and body, an approach in which something from the outside is temporarily given healing belief in the mind. And this is because the last thing that can help the non-right-minded or the sick is an increase in fear. The non-right-minded are already in a fear-weakened state. And so if the non-right-minded person is inappropriately exposed to an, quote, undiluted, unquote, miracle, then that person may be precipitated into panic. And someone panicking when they are inappropriately exposed to an undiluted miracle, this is particularly likely to occur when upside-down perception has induced the belief that miracles are frightening. The value of this healing plan does not lie in the manner in which it is expressed. In fact, if this healing plan is truly used, it will inevitably be expressed in whatever way is most helpful to the receiver, not the giver. This means that a miracle, to attain its full efficacy, must be expressed in a language which the recipient can understand without fear. Now, it doesn't follow by any means that this is the highest level of communication of which that person is capable. It does mean, however, that it is the highest level of communication of which this person is capable now. The whole aim of the miracle is to raise the level of communication, not to impose regression in the improper sense upon the communication. Before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world, it is essential that miracle workers fully understand the fear of release. Before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world, it is essential that the miracle workers fully understand the fear of release. Otherwise, the miracle workers may unwittingly foster the belief that release is imprisonment, a belief that is already very prevalent. And this misperception that release is imprisonment and that you should fear release, this misperception arose from the underlying misbelief that harm can be limited to the body. And this misbelief that harm can be limited to the body was because of the much greater fear that the mind can hurt itself. Neither error is really meaningful, because the miscreations of the mind do not really exist. And this recognition that the miscreations of the mind do not really exist is a far better protective device than any form of level confusion. Because this protective device introduces correction at the level of the error. It is essential to remember that only the mind can create. Implicit in this is the corollary that correction belongs at the thought level. To repeat an earlier statement and to extend it somewhat, the soul is already perfect, and the soul therefore does not require correction. And the body does not really exist except as a learning device for the mind. And this learning device that is the body is not subject to errors of its own, because the body learning device was created but is not creating. It should be obvious then that correcting the creator or inducing the mind to give up its miscreations is the only application of creative ability which is truly meaningful. Magic is essentially mindless, or the miscreative use of the mind. Physical medications are forms of spells. But those who are afraid to use the mind to heal should not attempt to use the mind to heal. The very fact that they are afraid has made them vulnerable to miscreation. Those who are afraid to use the mind to heal, these folks are therefore likely to misunderstand any healing that they might induce. And because egocentricity and fear usually occur together, this person may be unable to accept the real source of the healing. Someone who is afraid to use the mind to heal is someone who is likely to misunderstand any healing they might induce. And because egocentricity and fear usually occur together, this person may be unable to accept the real source of the healing. And under these conditions, it is safer for this person to rely temporarily on physical healing devices. Why? Because this person cannot misperceive these temporary physical healing devices as their own creations. And as long as your sense of vulnerability persists, you should be preserved from even attempting miracles. We have already said that the miracle is an expression of miracle-mindedness. Miracle-mindedness merely means right-mindedness in the sense that we are now using it. The right-minded neither exalt nor depreciate the mind of the miracle worker or the miracle receiver. However, as a creative act, the miracle need not await the right-mindedness of the receiver. In fact, the miracle's purpose is to restore them, others, to their right mind. It is essential, however, that the miracle worker be in their right mind, or the miracle worker will be unable to reestablish right-mindedness in someone else. The healer who relies on his own readiness is endangering their understanding. The healer is perfectly safe as long as the healer is completely unconcerned about their own readiness, but maintains a consistent trust in my readiness. If your miracle-working propensities are not functioning properly, it is always because fear has intruded on your right-mindedness, and fear has literally upset or turned your right-mindedness upside down. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of your refusal to accept the healing plan for yourself. If the miracle worker does accept the healing plan for themselves, the miracle worker places themselves in a position to recognize that those who need to be healed are simply those who have not realized that right-mindedness is healing. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the healing plan for themselves. This means that the miracle worker recognizes that mind is the only creative level. And it means that you recognize that your mind's errors are healed by the healing plan. Once the miracle worker accepts the healing plan for themselves, then the miracle worker's mind can only heal. By denying their mind any destructive potential and reinstating their mind's purely constructive powers, the miracle worker has placed themselves in a position where they can undo the level confusion of others. And now the message that the miracle worker gives to others is the truth that their minds are similarly constructive and that their miscreations cannot hurt them. By affirming their minds' similarly constructive natures, and by affirming that their errors cannot hurt them, the miracle worker releases the minds of others from over-evaluating their own learning device, the body, and it restores their mind to their mind's true position as the learner. It should be emphasized again that the body does not learn any more than the body creates. As a learning device, the body merely follows the learner. But if the learning device body is falsely endowed with self-initiative, then the learning device, the body, becomes a serious obstruction to the very learning that the body should facilitate. Only the mind is capable of illumination. The soul is already illuminated, and the body in itself is too dense to be illuminated. The mind, however, can bring its illumination to the body by recognizing that density of the body is the opposite of intelligence, and therefore density is unamenable to independent learning. The body is, however, easily brought into alignment with a mind which has learned to look beyond density, the density of the body, towards the light. The body is easily brought into alignment with a mind which has learned to look beyond the body toward light. Corrective learning always begins with the awakening of the spiritual eye and the turning away from the belief in physical sight. The reason that the awakening of the spiritual eye and the turning away from the belief in physical sight is so often frightening is because man is afraid of what his spiritual eye will see. But we've said before that the spiritual eye cannot see error, and the spiritual eye is capable only of looking beyond the error to the defense of the healing plan. There is no doubt that the spiritual eye does produce extreme discomfort by what it sees. Yet what man forgets is that the discomfort that is produced by what the spiritual eye sees, that discomfort is not the final outcome of the spiritual eye's perception. Because when the spiritual eye is permitted to look upon the defilement of your mind, then the spiritual eye also looks immediately toward the healing plan. Nothing the spiritual eye perceives can induce fear. And everything that results from accurate spiritual awareness is merely channelized towards correction. Discomfort is aroused only to bring the need for correction forcibly into awareness. What the physical eye sees is not corrective, nor can what the physical eye sees be corrected by any device which can be seen physically. As long as you believe in what your physical sight tells you, all your corrective behavior will be misdirected. As long as you believe in what your physical sight tells you, your real vision is obscured. And your real vision is obscured because you cannot endure to see your own defiled mind. But since your mind has been defiled, your state becomes doubly dangerous unless your state is perceived. The fear of healing arises, in the end, from an unwillingness to accept the unequivocal fact that healing is necessary. Man is not willing to look on what they have done to themselves. And healing is an ability lent to man after the separation, before which healing was completely unnecessary. Like all aspects of the space-time belief, healing ability is temporary. However, as long as time persists, healing is needed as a means for human protection. This is because healing rests on charity. And charity is a way of perceiving the perfection of another, even if you cannot see the perfection in yourself, is charity. Charity is a way of perceiving the perfection of another, even if they cannot perceive the perfection for themselves. is charity. Most of the loftier concepts of which you are now capable are time-dependent. Charity is really a weaker reflection of a much more powerful love encompassment, which is far beyond any form of charity that you can conceive of as yet. Charity is essential to right-mindedness in the limited sense in which right-mindedness can now be attained. Charity is a way of looking at another as if they had already gone far beyond their actual accomplishments in time. Since their own thinking is faulty, they cannot see the healing plan for themselves, or they would have no need for charity. The charity which is accorded them is both an acknowledgement that they are weak right now and a recognition that they could be stronger. The way in which both of these perceptions are stated clearly implies their dependence on time, making it quite apparent that charity lies within the human limitations, though toward its higher levels. We said before that only revelation transcends time. The miracle, as an expression of true human charity, can only shorten time at most. It must be understood, however, that whenever you offer a miracle to another, you are shortening the suffering of both. Whenever you offer a miracle to another, that introduces a correction into the whole record, which corrects retroactively as well as progressively. Chapter 2, Section 4, Fear as Lack of Love. You believe that being afraid is involuntary. You believe that being afraid is something beyond your control. Yet I have told you several times that only constructive acts should be involuntary. We have said that the Christ in you control can take over everything that does not matter, while Christ's guidance can direct everything that does matter if you so choose. Love control can take over everything that does not matter, while love guidance can direct everything that does matter if you so choose. Fear cannot be Christ-controlled, but fear can be self-controlled. Fear prevents me from controlling your fear. The correction of fear is therefore a matter of your will, because fear's presence shows that you have raised the unimportant to a higher level than it warrants. Fear shows that you have thus brought the unimportant under your will, where it does not belong. This means that you feel responsible for it. And the level confusion here is obvious. The reason I cannot control fear for you is that you are attempting to raise to the mind level the proper content of lower order reality. I do not foster level confusion, but you can choose to correct it. You would not tolerate insane behavior on your part, and you would hardly advance the excuse that you could not help that insane behavior. But why should you then tolerate insane thinking? By saying, I couldn't help my insane thinking. You wouldn't tolerate insane behavior on your part by saying, I couldn't help my insane behavior. Well, then why should you tolerate insane thinking, saying you can't help your insane thinking? There is a confusion here which you would do well to look at clearly. You believe that you are responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. But the truth is that you are responsible for what you think, because it is only at the level of what you think that you can exercise choice. What you do comes from what you think. You cannot separate yourself from the truth by, quote, giving autonomy to your behavior. Your behavior is controlled by me automatically as soon as you place what you think under my guidance. And whenever you are afraid, it is a sure sign that you have allowed your mind to miscreate, which means you have not allowed me to guide your thinking. And it's pointless to believe that controlling the outcome of your misthought can result in healing. When you are fearful, you have willed wrongly. You have chosen wrongly. And this is why you feel responsible for the fear, because it was your choice, your wrong choice. You must change your mind, not your behavior. And changing your mind is a matter of will. You do not need guidance except at the mind level. And that's because correction belongs only at the level where creation is possible. The term correction does not mean anything at the symptom level where the correction cannot work. The correction of fear is your responsibility. When you ask for release from fear, you are implying that fear is not your responsibility. Instead, you should ask for help in the conditions which has brought the fear about. And the conditions which have brought the fear about always entail a separated mind willingness. At the level of a separated mind willingness, you can help it. You are much too tolerant of mind wandering. You are much too tolerant of mind wandering, thus passively condoning your mind's miscreations. The particular result of your mind wandering doesn't matter, but the fundamental error does. And the correction is always the same. Before you choose to do anything, ask me if your choice is in accord with my choice. And if you are sure that your choice is in accord with my choice, there will be no fear. Fear is always a sign of strain. Fear is a sign of strain which arises whenever the will to do conflicts with what you do. And the situation where you are experiencing the strain of what you want to do conflicts with what you do. This situation arises in two ways. First, you can choose to do conflicting things, either simultaneously or successively. Choosing to do conflicting things produces conflicted behavior, which is intolerable to yourself, because the part of you that wants to do something else is outraged. And the second experience of strain, where what you want to do conflicts with what you do, arises in the second way. Second, you can behave as you think you should, but without entirely wanting to do so. And this produces consistent behavior, but entails great strain within the self. These are the two ways that we create strain and fear for ourselves. Whenever what we want to do conflicts with what we do. In both cases, the will and the behavior are out of accord, resulting in a situation in which you are doing what you don't want to do. And when you are doing what you don't want to do, that arouses a sense of coercion, which usually produces rage. And the rage then invades the mind, and projection in the wrong sense is likely to follow. And depression or anxiety is virtually certain. Remember that whenever there is fear, it is because you have not made up your mind. Whenever there is fear, your mind is split, and your behavior inevitably becomes erratic. Whenever there is fear, your mind is split. You have not made up your mind, and your behavior inevitably becomes erratic. Now, correcting at the behavioral level can shift the error from the first manifestation of strain to the second type of strain described above, but it will not obliterate the fear that's coming from the strain of doing what you don't want to do. It is possible to reach a state in which you bring your will under my guidance without much conscious effort. But this implies habit patterns which you have not developed dependably as yet. God cannot ask more than you will. The strength to do comes from your own undivided will to do. There is no strain in doing God's will as soon as you recognize that God's will is also your own will. The lesson here is quite simple, but particularly apt to be overlooked. I will therefore repeat it, urging you to listen. Only your mind can produce fear. And your mind produces fear whenever your mind is conflicted in what it wants, thus producing inevitable strain because willing and doing become discordant. And this cannot be corrected by better doing, but this strain and fear can be corrected by higher willing. Chapter 2, Section 5, The Correction for Lack of Love. The first corrective step for fear is know first that this is an expression of fear. And that's the first corrective step for fear, is know first that this is an expression of fear. And then the next step is to say to yourself that you must somehow have willed not to love, or the fear which arises from behavior will conflict could not have arisen. This is an expression of fear. I must have somehow chosen not to love, or this fear would not have arisen. And then the whole process of the correction of fear is nothing more than a series of pragmatic steps in the larger process of accepting the correction, the healing plan for fear as the remedy. These steps for the correction of fear can be summarized as follows. 1, know first that this is fear. 2, fear arises from lack of love. 3, the only remedy for lack of love is perfect love. And 4, perfect love is the healing miracle. We have emphasized that the miracle, or the expression of the healing plan, is always a sign of real respect from the worthy to the worthy. This worth is reestablished by this healing plan. It is obvious then that when you are afraid, you have placed yourself in a position where you need the healing plan because you have done something loveless, because you chose without love. Is why you are afraid. Now you, having placed yourself in a position where you need healing because you did something loveless, because you chose without love, this is precisely the situation for which this healing plan was offered. The need for this remedy inspired this remedy's creation. But as long as you recognize only the need for the remedy, you will remain fearful. However, as soon as you remedy it, the fear, you have also abolished the fear. And this is how true healing occurs. You recognize that you need help, and then you accept the remedy, the correction for fear that you didn't make, for the fear you did make, fear you did choose, because you did something loveless, because you had been choosing and thinking without love. Recognizing the need for the healing of the fear, and then accepting it, is how true healing occurs. Everyone experiences fear, and no one enjoys it. Yet it would take very little right thinking to realize why fear occurs. Very few people appreciate the real power of the mind, and no one remains fully aware of the power of the mind all the time. However, if anyone hopes to spare themselves from fear, there are some things they must realize, and realize fully. For instance, if you hope to spare yourself from fear, you must realize that the mind is a very powerful creator, and the mind never loses its creative force. The mind never sleeps. Every instant the mind is creating, and the mind is always creating as you will, as you choose. Many of your ordinary expressions reflect this. For example, when you say, "Oh, don't give it a thought," you imply that if you don't think about something, it will have no effect on you. And this is true enough. On the other hand, many other expressions clearly illustrate the prevailing lack of awareness of thought power. For example, you say, "Just an idle thought," and you mean that the thought has no effect. You also speak of some actions as thus thoughtless, implying that if the person had thought, they would not behave as they did. While expressions like, quote, "think big," give some recognition to the power of thought, expressions like "think big" still come nowhere near the truth of your thought power. You do not expect to grow when you say it, "think big," because you don't really think that you will grow when you say think big. It's hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is merely arrogant. But that's not the real reason why you don't believe that your thought and belief can combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. People prefer to believe that their thoughts cannot exert real control because people are literally afraid of their thoughts. That's why people prefer to believe that their thoughts do not have such power as to literally move mountains, because people are literally afraid of their thoughts. Many psychotherapists attempt to help people who are afraid, say, of their death wishes, by depreciating the power of their death wish. Many psychotherapists even try to, quote, free the patient by persuading the patient that the patient can think whatever they want without any real effects at all. Is a way that psychotherapists attempt to help people who are afraid by depreciating the power of their wish and depreciating the power of their minds, depreciating the power of their thoughts. There is a real dilemma here which only the truly right-minded can escape. Death wishes do not kill in the physical sense, but death wishes do kill spiritual awareness. All destructive thinking is dangerous. Given a death wish, a man has no choice except to act upon the thought or behave contrary to the wish, the death wish. Given a death wish, a man has no choice except to act upon the death wish or behave contrary to their death wish. This person thus chooses only between homicide and fear if they have a death wish. The other possibility, if someone has a death wish, is that this someone depreciates the power of their thought. And depreciating the power of their thought, their death thoughts, is the usual psychoanalytic approach. The psychoanalytic approach does allay guilt for the death wish, but at the cost of rendering thinking impotent. If you believe that what you think is ineffectual, you may cease to be overly afraid of it, but you are hardly likely to respect what you think. The world is full of examples of how man has depreciated themselves because they are afraid of their own thoughts. In some forms of insanity, thoughts are glorified, but this is only because the underlying depreciation was too effective for tolerance. The truth is that there are no idle thoughts. All thinking produces form at some level. The reason people are afraid of ESP, and the reason people so often react against ESP, is because people know that thoughts can hurt them, because their own thoughts have made them vulnerable. You who constantly complain about fear, you still persist in creating fear. I told you before that you cannot ask me to release you from fear because I know fear doesn't exist, but you do not. If I merely intervened between your thoughts and their results, I would be tampering with a basic law of cause and effect, the most fundamental law there is in this world. I would hardly help if I depreciated the power of your own thinking. And depreciating the power of your own thinking would be in direct opposition to the purpose of this course. It is much more helpful to remind you that you don't guard your own thoughts carefully, except for a small part of the day, and somewhat inconsistently even then. It is much more helpful to remind you that you do not guard your thoughts carefully enough, except for a small part of the day, and somewhat inconsistently even then. You may feel at this point that it would take a miracle for you to enable you to guard your thoughts carefully enough. And that is perfectly true. It would take a miracle for you to guard your thoughts carefully enough at this point. You are not used to miracle thinking. You are not used to miraculous thinking. But you can be trained to think miraculously. And all miracle workers need that kind of training, how to think miraculously. And I cannot let miracle workers leave their minds unguarded, or the miracle workers will not be able to help me. Miracle working entails a full realization of the power of thought and real avoidance of miscreation. And if you don't have a realization of the power of thought, and so you don't avoid miscreation, a miracle will be necessary to set your mind itself straight. A circular process which would hardly foster the time collapse for which the miracle was intended. Nor would it induce the healthy respect for true cause and effect, which every miracle worker must have. Every miracle worker must have the healthy respect for true cause and effect. For miracle working. Miracle working entails a full realization of the power of thought and real avoidance of miscreation. Miracles cannot free the miracle worker from fear. Both miracles and fear come from thoughts. And if you were not free to choose one thought, you would also not be free to choose the other thought. If you weren't free to choose fear, then you wouldn't be free to choose the miracle. By choosing the miracle, you have rejected fear. You have been afraid of God. You've been afraid of me. You've been afraid of yourselves. And you've been afraid of practically everyone you know at one time or another. And this is because you have misperceived or miscreated us, and you believe in what you have made. But you would never have misinterpreted us and then believed in what you had made if you had not been afraid of your own thoughts. The vulnerable are essentially miscreators because the vulnerable misperceive creation. You persist in believing that when you do not consciously watch your mind is unmindful. It is time, however, to consider the whole world of the unconscious, or the, quote, unwatched mind. Considering the whole world of the unconscious or the unwatched mind may well frighten you, because the unwatched mind is the source of fear. The unwatched mind is responsible for the whole content of the unconscious. The unconscious, which lies above the miracle level. The whole unconscious lies above the miracle level. All psychoanalytic theorists have made some contribution in this connection, but none of them has seen it in its true entirety. And all the psychoanalytic theorists, they all made one common error in that they attempted to uncover unconscious content. You cannot understand unconscious activity in these terms because content is applicable only to the more superficial unconscious levels to which the individual themselves contributes. The superficial unconscious levels is the level at which you can readily introduce fear, and you usually do, to the superficial unconscious levels. When you miscreate, you are in pain. The cause and effect principle here is temporarily a real expediter. Actually, cause is a term properly belonging to God, and effect, which should also be capitalized, is cause's child. God as cause and us as effect entails a set of cause and effect relationships which are totally different from those relationships which man introduced into their own miscreations. The fundamental opponents in the real basic conflict are creation and miscreation. Those are the fundamental opponents in the real basic conflict. It's creation and miscreation. and all fear is implicit in the miscreation, just as all love is inherent in the first, which is creation. And because of this difference, the basic conflict is one between love and fear. It has already been said that man believes they cannot control fear because they themselves created fear. Your belief in fear seems to render fear out of your control by definition. Yet any attempt to resolve the basic conflict through the concept of mastery of fear is meaningless. By attempting to resolve the fear by mastering the fear, that in fact asserts the power of fear by the simple assumption that that fear need to be mastered. The essential resolution rests entirely on the mastery of love. In the interim, the sense of conflict is inevitable, since you have placed yourself in a strangely illogical position. You believe in the power of what does not exist. Two concepts which cannot coexist are nothing and everything. And to whatever extent one is believed in, the other has been denied. In the conflict, fear is really nothing, and love is everything. This is because whenever light enters darkness, the darkness is abolished. What you believe is true for you. What you believe is true for you. And that what you believe is true for you. In this sense, the separation has occurred. And to deny that the separation that you believe in has occurred is merely to misuse denial. What you believe is true for you. And in this sense, the separation has occurred. And to deny the separation has occurred when you believe it is merely to misuse denial. However, to concentrate on error is merely a further misuse of defenses. The true corrective procedure is to recognize error temporarily, but only as an indication that immediate correction is mandatory. And when you recognize the error as an indication that immediate correction is mandatory, this establishes a state of mind in which the healing plan can be accepted without delay. It should be emphasized, however, that ultimately there is no compromise possible between everything and nothing. And time is essentially a device by which all compromise in this respect can be given up. This compromise between everything and nothing seems to be abolished by degrees, because time itself involves a concept of intervals which do not really exist. The faulty use of creation made this necessary as a corrective device. Quote, "And God so loved the world that God gave God's only begotten child, that whosoever believeth in them shall not perish but have eternal life," unquote, needs only one slight correction to be entirely meaningful in this context. It should read, God gave the world to God's only creation, God's only one creation. God gave the world to God's only created child. It should especially be noted that God has only one creation, one child. And if all the souls God created are God's souls, God's children, then every soul must be an integral part of the whole family of God. You do not find the concept that the whole is greater than its parts difficult to understand. You should therefore not have too much trouble in understanding this. The family of God in its oneness does transcend the sum of its parts. However, this is hidden as long as any of the family of God's parts are missing. That is why the conflict cannot ultimately be resolved until all the parts of the family of God have returned. The conflict cannot ultimately be resolved until all the parts of creation have returned. And until all the parts of creation have returned, only then can the meaning of wholeness in the true sense be fully understood. Any part of the family of God can believe in error or incompleteness if they so elect. However, if any part of creation does believe in incompleteness, then that person is believing in the existence of nothingness. And the correction of their error, believing in the existence of nothingness, is the correction, that is the healing. And we have already briefly spoken about readiness, but there are some additional points which might be helpful here. Readiness is nothing more than the prerequisite for accomplishment. Readiness and accomplishment should not be confused. As soon as a state of readiness occurs, there is usually some desire to accomplish. But this desire to accomplish is by no means necessarily undivided. The state of readiness does not imply more than a potential for a shift of will. Confidence cannot develop fully until mastery has been accomplished. We have already attempted to correct the fundamental error that fear can be mastered, and we have emphasized that only love can be mastered. You have attested only to your readiness. Mastery of love involves a much more complete confidence than either of you has attained. However, the readiness at least is an indication that you believe that this is possible to accomplish the accomplishment of love. Readiness is only the beginning of confidence. In case this be misunderstood to imply that an enormous amount of time will be necessary between readiness and mastery, let me remind you that time and space are under my control. Should you think that an enormous amount of time will be necessary between your readiness and your mastery, let me remind you that time and space are under my control. One of the chief ways in which you can correct your magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. Now, you are apt to forget that you did not create yourself when you become egocentric, because when you become egocentric, you are in a position where the belief in magic in some form is virtually inevitable. Your will to create was given you by your own Creator, who was expressing the same will to create in its creation of you. Since creative ability rests in the mind, then everything that you create is necessarily a matter of will. It also follows that whatever you create is real in your own sight, but not necessarily in the sight of God. And this basic distinction between what you create and what God has created, this basic distinction leads us directly into the real meaning of the Last Judgment.